Okay, and welcome to the first episode of the Sports Integrity Action Month podcast, a podcast by the Sports Integrity Global Alliance, also known as SIGA. This podcast is built in conjunction with the Sports Integrity Action Month initiative, a month long global movement designed to deliver more impact, more engagement, and greater participation than ever before. Throughout this podcast, we'll be supporting our mission of promoting integrity, good governance, transparency, and accountability in sport. Today, we'll be discussing a couple of SIGA's core priorities, such as technology, innovation, and global business, as well as environmental, social, and economic sustainability. I am so lucky to have Sandra Lopez on with me today, our first guest for this amazing project. Sandra, how's it going?
Great. Doing really good. Super excited to be a part of the Sports Integrity Global Alliance family and its community. I'm part of the North America co-chair. And ironically, we're going to be kicking off our advisory meeting tomorrow. So this is serendipity in terms of timing.
Good time and getting warmed up. We can start kind of, yeah, just introducing you a little bit more. Let's learn a little bit more about your background. I know, quick scope, you've been at Intel, you've been at Microsoft, and now you're with Ambi Ventures.
Yeah.
And yeah, as a co-chair of SIGA's America Advisory Board, maybe walk me through a bit of your background to help our audience get a bit of a better footing on your history and expertise.
Yeah. So my background overall has been in the tech industry. Majority of the time has been focused on the marketing side, and it really comes from the curiosity of seeking to understand your consumer audience and really providing that enterprise-wide perspective of who are we in service to. And translating that, I always like to say that, some of the best CMOs are psychologists and sociologists at heart, because you're really understanding what's going on in the mind of your audience. I've done it both for startups, mid-size and large. I think the last part of my pedigree seems predominantly large enterprise, but it's a little bit deceptive because when I was at Intel, I had the fortunate opportunity partnering with some other team members to kick off the Intersports business unit. And that was really about bringing technology innovation to the sports industry. We looked around and, at that point in time when we were doing our analysis, and this was back like I think in 2013, 2014, one of the industries that we felt had not used the full capacity of technology was in the sports industry. And we thought that, and Intel was really about a company that can look ahead into the future, that there was an opportunity to be partnering with the sports industry and bringing value to the entire sports ecosystem. And when I say that, I mean the athletes, the fans, the teams, and the leagues, and the brand partners. And so with that, we set that off, and that really got me back into the world of sports. I felt like it was always in my DNA. Having my father was, well-known thoroughbred horse jockey, and so, and I was, I would like to say that I was a more casual athlete. I wasn't really competitive. I blame that on my height, but overall, like that kind of brought me back into the sports industry. And in the process of being part of the Intel Sports family, I got to meet with Emmanuel, who is the CEO and founder of Sports Integrity Global Alliance. Um, and I hear his conviction around equity and integrity. And those are the very pillars of who I am as an individual and what I believe in. And so when I had an opportunity to learn more, I absolutely leaned in. And it's such an honor to be part of this organization and be co-chair, to driving discussions and challenging the industry to do better. We all can do better as individuals. All industries can do better, and the sports industry is not, it's not in isolation. It's lots of areas for improvement around the world of equity and integrity.
Amazing. Awesome. I really appreciate that backstory there. You're right. Like there's always places we can improve, especially as an industry where there's equity and as far as integrity. In the world of technology, it's rapidly evolving now more than ever. Um, so maybe where does this new innovation help build sporting integrity, and maybe where should it be taken more seriously as a potential threat as far as technological innovations?
I mean, I think there's so many tentacles of technology that could be woven into the fabric of the sports, ecosystem. And so let's start with like what different technologies can do. So, in my past day when we were at Intel Sports, we were building virtual reality and volumetric video. And I'll start with the fan, and that was really done in the essence of giving we going back to the insight of like understanding your consumers. The fans play video games. They have been conditioned, especially the millennials, Gen Z, and Alpha, and understanding how they were consuming content. So they were playing video games, they were, looking at Instagram, scrolling through TikTok and Snap. And so they no longer would sit in front of a TV and watch an entire game. They were starting to consume highlights. And at the same time, the cost to participate and go to a particular game, whether it's NBA, NFL, or baseball for that matter, in some cases is constraining if you don't have the economic means. And sports is becoming global, where there's somebody in this outskirts of China that is a big fan of Steph Curry, for example. And so, will that person ever travel to San Francisco? Maybe, and maybe not. So why don't you provide them with access to being able to get closer and feel like they're um, on the court? And so you think about virtual reality, and that gives you access to kind of really court people there. And so when you talk about, what does that do from an integrity standpoint, is the belief that everybody should have an opportunity to feel like they're actually part of the game. FIFA World Cup is coming up next year. How many people, I mean, the affordability to travel and providing them a snippet of what that feels like to be on court, I think is important. And similarly, when you look at Bitcoin and the transparency, I don't know about you, but I've bought sports tickets on the secondhand market, and I go to the game, and then I scan my ticket, and it's a fraud.
Oh
And
no.
right, so e being able to leverage Bitcoin for the authenticity and thinking about, like, NFTs and making sure that that is an authentic ticket. You talk about that in terms of from a fan, and bringing transparency and integrity into that. And then, you could go into, Bitcoin, and we think about what's recently happening around, sports betting, and being able to be detectives and scan the internet and identify when there is something that is not normal happening. And being able to identify that and identify possible fraud. There is also the notion of, you think about Bitcoin and following an athlete that gets, X number, their overall fees, whether it's from, brand sponsorships and the team in the league, and being able to track that, and there was no adjustments being made in the back end. Or whether it's, using technology to track, the votes that are happening from an overall sports federation and making sure that there was no rigging involved. There is the going back to like my technology in the past, where you know, you could argue that in some cases, the officiating staff could be biased. We're all biased. I'm biased, and we see things through the human eye. And imagine that you have the human eye, couple that obviously right now they're using replays with traditional broadcasting technology, been able to use volumetric video and AI and sensors, and compile all that to really give a perspective of what happened in that particular play. So the right judgments being made, and it's objective on through the technology. And then you also have the power of the eye of the officiators and trying to make the right decision. In some cases, we've seen where decisions have been made by an officiator where it was, they called a game, and maybe the other team really believed that they should have won. And so can you have I would call it, a balance of uh, checks and balances. And so I do believe that you need humans in officiating, and I think that can be complemented with advanced technology. And you can go on and on and on of how many different types of technologies like you could use, or and it's all around, depends on how you talk about integrity, but the integrity of, I think every aspiring athlete should have the shot to compete. And I don't know about in Canada where you're at, but at least in the US, to be competitive, it costs so much money. It's really hard on the parents. In some cases, parents can't afford to take their kids cross country. And I love the technology like Huddle, where it gives people the access to pull together their reels and share it with the recruiting staff. That to me is amazing, or even social media and TikTok and being able to get the attention of
Totally.
a so that they have an opportunity. And I don't think, in terms of integrity, I don't think it's fair that only those that have the economic means are able to, have a shot at their dreams. And those that, like, we may have some amazing players that we never know existed because of affordability. And so I think technology, when used correctly, could do so much for the world of sports in the right way, whether, ensuring there's transparency, whether it's adding data to ensure that an athlete doesn't get hurt, and, with all the wearable performance data. So it's endless. You just have to be very thoughtful of how you use it and possible implications as well.
Amazing. I really appreciate that answer. I'm gonna go back a little bit to when you talked about understanding the consumers and then the cost related to even just consuming sports, drawing back to the Steph Curry fan in East Asia, or the cost to participate. It is, yeah, it's just as expensive in Canada as well to be competitive, and unfortunately, you do see some corruption because of that. In terms of these new technological developments that kind of impact integrity, as you mentioned AI, as you mentioned the blockchain, and how sometimes even pirating. Um, Imagine a perfect world in 2050 and define maybe how some of these tools have been refined to help and build integrity in sports specifically.
I mean, I really believe that it's a great question. And you look at it in terms of, in 2050, that technology is just part of the DNA. And it's really, mm, and technology is just a tool. And reality is, it's not about the tools that will continue to exist. I mean, there's always these, um, arcs that happen in technology revolution. Before we had a computer, it was a massive mainframe and then became a computer. And then we had the smaller pocket devices, which was your smartphones. And then we had social media. And so I've been fortunate because now I'm dating myself. Like in the late 90s, like internet just started to come on. And I remember the time where we used to have to ask ourselves, will anybody ever put their credit card on the internet? And look at us now.
Oh my gosh, now
Tools are
it's
going to continue to like evolve. I mean, I think there's people talk about telepathy, and we have to accept that we live in a world in which technology innovates at an accelerated rate. But more than anything, it's up to the humans to bring curiosity of how do you leverage the technology for a world of equity and integrity within the world of sports. So I think curiosity, it's more on the human curiosity, and also understanding the implications. And as an example, so when I was involved in the wearable industry and we were talking about human performance, and we had the fortunate opportunity to talk to athletes, in some cases they didn't want their data to be provided um, to the team. It's their data. They didn't want their data to be sold or be used for betting. And so, with every technology, there's an advantage and possibly a disadvantage. And it requires human interference, or in the tech industry, now that we're talking about AI, it's called human loop. There's a human loop involved in there, and really thinking about, when we deploy this technology, how could it not only benefit, and who's going to be harmed in the process potentially? And as an executive of a league or a team, I shouldn't be reliant on the players association to kind of challenge and be there and be the voice of the athlete, because without the athletes we have no sport. So really thinking about the implications. So, I wish I could predict the future. I think technology is continuously going to change. You know, you we don't know what it's all exactly going to look like, but what we do know is there's always going to be a human involved, and that human has the responsibility of thinking about the value that technology will add and not resist it, and and look at it from a tool and understand the implications and choose to be on the right side of history and not use technology to rig the system.
And then we spoke a little bit before we started recording about human responsibility as far as these developments, and what responsibility really comes with, okay, we're going to offer sports betting, okay, we're going to make this data available. Um, how can sports organizations and governmental bodies implement sustainable and responsible goals into their integrity decision making? Or how can they put these two factors together as, we're going to make these decisions, we're going to move forward, this is how we can be responsible, and how can they keep integrity at the center of that?
I mean, I say this because I do believe currently, unless you've been doing AI research and you've been part of you've been a PhD for years, I think we're all learning AI real time together.
Oh yeah.
And I said this to somebody just recently, like, I need an advisory board around AI because I don't know what I don't know. And I think similarly, when we're talking about sports betting and putting tools together to address XYZ that the, you know, organizing bodies is seeking to do, I believe that you need to go out and figure out, like, the board of directors or a group of advisors, engage Sports Integrity Global Alliance, SIGA, as an organizing body to see how other people are doing it. Engage somebody in the technology industry, whether it's OpenAI or Google. Like, I would suggest to have an advisory council as you're kind of continuing on this journey, so long as you understand, have clarity of what your strategic goals and imperatives are, and have your advisors provide a perspective.
Amazing. And I know SIGA does also provide a lot of tools to kind of help guide and kind of provide some advisory for some of these goals as well. SIGA's played a big role in bringing integrity to the ESG goals of today's sports governance stage. How does SIGA's universal standards and tools such as the SIGA Independent Rating and Verification System that we call SIRVS help investors evaluate organizations they support, and what impact will it carry into the next generation of sports innovators, sports technology, and investors as a whole?
I mean, I think the question is, again, like when I said, without athletes, there's no sports. Without fans, there's no sports. And what I've noticed as a marketer, and that's how I started off the conversation, I pay attention to culture and where the pendulum is swinging so that the companies I serve can best, like, be suited for success. And what I'm starting to see is, at a global level, people really have strong values. And the values are about equity and integrity. And so having somebody like SIGA and having SERVS that looks at teams or looks at leagues and provides, it's very similar. I always talk to, like, Emmanuel about this. A shortcut is, there's a company called Lead where they go to buildings and they try to see if it's a green building, and then they have that emblem outside of the building that has
I've
leads,
seen it. Yeah.
right? It's the same thing, is that SIGA is going to look at your team or an association and say, like, are they aligning to the SIGA standards based on a third party input? It's not necessarily SIGA creating it and providing that stamp of approval. And if you're not, and there's areas that you have to address, they have access to people that have done this at a worldwide level. And so providing that insight and value to how to get there. And so doing those audits, to me, is amazing as a self-reflection of where we are, where do we want to go, and fundamentally understanding that your fan cares about this and they are paying attention. And they'll vote with their wallet. And so they'll determine what teams to go, games to go watch. As they learn more and more, and as things become much more transparent of how leagues and teams are operating, I would highly suggest having the SIGA stamp of approval is going to be a value add and increase the valuation of a team or a league, because the future fans, the Gen Zs and alphas, care about this, and we're seeing it in terms of where their wallet is going and how they're choosing to vote. We saw that kind of recently in the elections.
Absolutely. It's such a great tool. Especially, yeah, as you mentioned, with everything just becoming more transparent, especially from a governance stage in sports. And as far as, leagues and teams, organizations, everything is really out in the open now. And it becomes so much more beneficiary yeah, invest in getting those stamps of approvals and invest in getting those advisors to come and give you a thorough audit to say, hey, this is where we need to improve, because that sort of stamp of approval is where the investors are going to look first. Um, Sandra, I really appreciate you taking your time today to speak with us. I'm going to wrap it up here, but your insight has been invaluable, honestly, and I look forward to re-listening to all this as I edit it and getting this out there. But I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you for having me.
All right, have a good one.
Take care. Have a good one. Bye.